It has been started, so go ahead.
Awesome, thank you. Welcome to the January 28th Joint Facilities Advisory Commission meeting. We are holding a virtual meeting today due to the state of emergency and as authorized by legislation adopted by the Virginia General Assembly and consistent with JFAC's electronic meeting policy. This meeting is being recorded for our public records and will be posted to the Arlington County Commission Meetings YouTube page. The Microsoft Teams meeting chat is active to serve two purposes: for participants who need technical assistance and to indicate that you would like to speak during public comment. We will hold public comment periods at the beginning and end of the meeting. Those requesting to may speak during only one comment period and will be allotted up to 3 minutes to speak tonight on tonight's agenda items. When virtual attendees are called upon to speak, you must unmute yourself by clicking on the microphone icon that is located on your meeting command bar. The moderator does not have the ability to unmute you. You'll be muted when your time has concluded. For commissioners, please keep your camera on for the duration of the meeting. Otherwise, you will be marked absent and unable to participate. If you wish to be recognized, please use the raise hand feature within Teams or ask to be recognized by using the chat box. Lastly, this is a public forum. All information associated with today's meeting, whether written or spoken, is subject to the Freedom of Information Act requirements. Okay. For the chair's update, wanted to announce that John Mingus has graciously volunteered to serve as vice chair, I think is the correct term, for JFAC, and pending board approval of both the county and the public school, he will be officially recognized as such. My term as chair was only for 1 year. Kathleen has John's assignment as vice chair and my renewal. According to Emily, I have 2 years remaining on JFAC. I'll leave it to the board to decide how long they wish me to serve as JFAC chair. But I'm happy to do that if for the next 2 years, if so approved. What else? We have the agenda items that we came up with in December for this meeting. In the spirit of trying to stay ahead so we don't cancel any other meetings, and in that email that April sent to the members, I would like perhaps towards the end of the meeting or to talk about plans for February and March. And that way it gives everyone a time to think about it. I know that in talking with Kathleen, I would like to do a study on how public-private partnerships are working currently at APS and regarding the use of facility spaces, whether it's for fields for sports, schools for meeting places, or other county facilities for meeting spaces, artists, facilities for performance facilities or rehearsal spaces, and indoor sports. That's just off the top of my head, and I'm looking for any of the commissioners to kind of do a deep dive in one of those fields and like how the reservation process works, if there's any hiccups. It seems like we've got a good policy, but the actual implementation of it is a little disjointed. What works at one school doesn't necessarily work at another, and you need to know the right person. And I'd like to get a good handle on where that sits for at least maybe the March meeting. If we can do it then, that would be great. But that gives everybody 60 days to try and do it. What's up, April?
I don't mind researching on one of those. I guess I would do the how facilities are being the whole sorry, my brain the reservation for facilities. I think there were two topics, right? One was public-private partnership, one was
basically is the same
facilities.
thing. Yeah, so how public-private partnerships work currently, and and it's if you want to do that, what is the process that just to take pick 4 or 5 facilities and go do a deep dive on who meets there, who doesn't, if they have a process that's easy, looking at how community groups are able to access the space, if at all, and then indoor sports and art facilities, performance spaces.
Okay, I suppose we could break it up into facility use, public use of facility use, and how that public-private facility use, and then there's also, I guess, public-private partnerships beyond that, I suppose.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
advertising on sports fields or whatever. Like, I don't know. That's what I think of when I think of private. Like, I don't know. Is that?
What? Yeah, yes, you're not wrong. That could be the meaning, but right now, just looking at facility utilization, our public spaces by private entities, whether they be for-profit, nonprofit, whatever, that are occurring, and if they're not occurring, what are the barriers? But if you want to look at it from the school's perspective, somebody else could, reach out. I've got a couple leads on community members who have had, who have feedback on the process, on how it, good and bad, how it works. So
Does
that
anyone
could
else
be.
want to work on it with me?
Yeah, so actually, Andy, I think for the February meeting, you had asked me the broad we from our previous email
Yes.
request on this, that think about nonprofit use of space. So I think that sort of feeds into
Okay.
this a lot. And so I've actually I'll resend it to both Jeff and Emily, just sort of trying to get some context to sort of understand some policy and if there's any system-wide data that we can access. So,
Okay.
since in some ways, April, this will feed in what I sort of envisioned doing in February would feed in well into something else. And I'd be glad to handle the sports, the non-school
field,
sports side
rec.
of that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I can handle that side of the question for March.
Great. So we need to
Also
look at
depending on what
this.
we get for February as well. So
Okay.
April, would you mind just looking at schools as a place for meeting spaces and how that works,
Okay.
or isn't working?
Sure. Yeah, that's fine. I guess there's also library. There's additional. So if he's doing field and rec, I guess.
Yeah.
There, I guess I could try. I mean, I don't really
Yeah.
know how to find this information, but I could try to find it for all of other besides
Yes.
Sports and fields, I guess.
You like the community, like there's community centers throughout the
Yeah.
county. The one in Aurora Highlands is, I've never seen it being used, but I know the neighborhood association meets there, and there's a couple different neighborhood associations meet there. Like,
Okay.
how does that work? Is that something that other nonprofits can also take advantage of? Or
All right, I'll try
Yeah.
it. It's not just
You're the best.
nonprofits, right? It's
Correct.
anybody, right?
Anybody? Yep.
Okay, sure.
Sweet. Okay. All right, so John will do fields for February. Are you good for schools in March?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. And then Kathleen, I don't want to misspeak. The point April made about public-private partnerships, does this meet the spirit of what we had talked about, or is there something else? Like partnering with private entities for certain things?
Yeah, so I think, and Jeff, please keep me honest here. The goal would be to look at ways particularly from a CIP perspective and a funding perspective. When we were thinking about doing some facilities works, what are some examples of public-private partnerships? So we have some examples from PG County that we're looking at. But if there's other work that has been done that's available, that would be really helpful as we're looking at ways that we can do work. And whether that is just for schools, school buildings themselves, because our schools are aged and require some TLC, or it's our fields, right? Because we know we have some fields that need, like, whatever there is out there would be helpful for us to go through.
Actually,
Kathleen-
Kathleen, it would be helpful. What are you talking about with PG? Like what, like an example? And
Let me
yeah.
see if I can grab the link, Natalie, and I'll put it into our chat so you guys can see. It was at a school board meeting, maybe in November. I think we discussed it. So I will let me see if I can find that, and I'll
That'd be
drop
great.
it in.
Thanks.
Awesome.
Kathleen, does Kenmore count? I mean, the sort of the Kenmore revitalization
Yeah, I mean, like we're doing some of that work now. I think the funding for that is pretty well baked.
Yeah, but in terms
Again,
of sort of an example of how it
yeah,
sort of
that would be an example. Yeah, yes, yes. That would be, I'm trying to think if there's any place else in the county now where we see that. I think Quincy Park, right, is used by a lot, not just WNL for baseball. It's
yeah, there's
used.
some Marymount usage. The other one actually is Longbridge,
Yeah,
I mean, there's the funding
yeah,
side of it from Boeing, but sort of the ongoing, it's technically field one. It's the bigger field that Marymount.
yes,
I mean, the
yes,
Marymount space. That's a good example of sort of how their needs and our need and a a private need was co-met
yes,
with public
Yeah.
space and
yep,
funding.
yep.
Okay. Will your discussion, John, talk about the Longbridge fields?
I'll talk about Longbridge. I'll talk about
Kenmore.
Kenmore.
Perfect. Okay, great. Awesome. That should cover us for February and March. I'm sure there'll be other things that'll come up. I'm meeting with our new, that's the other last thing I have for a chair's update before we open up to public comment is we have a new county liaison. Takis is our new appointed liaison for JFAC, and I'll be meeting with him and hopefully John later in or early in February. So I think we've got it set up to be on the second Monday of the month or something like that. But yeah, should be good. Okay. Now we will open up the floor to public comment. Before I turn it over to Emily to administer, just a friendly reminder that your comments need to be related to the agenda items or things that are related to JFAC's mission. Okay. Emily, take it away.
Great. So I saw Jeremy in the chat would like to speak. Would anybody else like to speak at the beginning of the meeting, just so we can determine how much time everyone gets? I'm not seeing anyone, so Jeremy, I mean, you have up to 3 minutes then. Does that sound good?
That sounds fine. I can assure you it's not going to take 3 minutes. I just wanted to take this opportunity to drop in and put a plug in for Jefferson Middle School on what seems to be a CIP process that is moving in the best direction we can hope for at the moment on giving that school, my school where I work as an activities coordinator, a full rehab, which I guess this will be the second time in my 23-year employment period it's come up as a possibility, and I'm hoping that the county will use this time also to upgrade its facilities that are there. It only makes good sense to let's strike now while everything's moving in a positive direction and try the best that we can to put our resources into this facility, which is drastically in need of a full rehab. Previously, I think we kind of ran up against Wakefield when they needed to be basically completely redone, obviously. And I think just as a public school employee, knowing what I know of the old Wakefield and what was going on at the time, I think that made really good sense. We had two new beautiful schools on the north side, and Wakefield was still like a 1951 vintage building. Beautiful as it was, and it's kind of like museum quality, it definitely needed to be redone. And I think that was a great move at the time. But now, hopefully, all the interested parties are kind of moving in the right direction to put Jefferson up to the front and give that building and what is certainly a hugely shared use space between the county and the schools kind of their time to get the resources that I think as an employee they're due. So with that, I will mute myself, but I appreciate the time to speak and just trying to keep that on everybody's front burner.
Thank you, Jeremy. Quick question for you, if you don't mind. You said you're activities coordinator. Do you
That's
coordinate
right.
do you coordinate activities like we've been referring to with the nonprofits or whatever using TJ space?
You know, it's interesting that you'd say that as I'm sitting here, I'm kind of listening to, I think the part that really struck me was when you said different schools do things different ways. So I'm pretty much strictly APS student focused
Gotcha.
sports
Okay.
after
Okay.
school stuff, but
Gotcha.
I receive calls all the time for facility use. And which leads me to believe that other schools, somebody in my position may potentially do that, or maybe they're just cold calling based on the web. I don't know, but
Totally.
I always refer them to the right place. But anyway, I think it bears merit to, kind of what you were saying earlier.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your input and fielding this random question. Natalie?
About that. Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. As a parent of three former Jefferson students, I can't agree with you more. I mean, that school drastically needs a rehab, needs a refresh, needs a whole redo. I want to ask Kathleen just what where everything stands on that. I mean, is there a way we can get just a quick update?
We are not done with the CIP yet. So,
I
we
got
gave
that.
we gave the superintendent direction and they are, working through that and it gets presented sometime later this spring.
Right. So is Jefferson's way up on the list, correct?
Yes, that is the direction that we provided. Yep.
Great. Great. Hey, I just think
we
needs
know
is-
it,
I know.
it's
I
not an
think every
either.
meeting, if it can just be rehashed, because one of my youngest, was it my youngest who lived there through the sort of Band-Aid one that was many years ago. I think that was, I don't know, it was
Yes.
18, 17 years ago, but that was just the Band-Aid refresh. And now, I mean, it's just such a well-used, facility that needs really so much attention. So anyway, thanks, Kathleen.
Yep, you're welcome. And that will be a good time for everyone to weigh into on sorry, I've been working all day. My brain's sort of gotta catch up here. That will be a great time for us to weigh in with JFAC on what that's going to look like from the joint facility piece of it.
Excellent. Not sure we have any other speakers who wish to speak before we close out public comment. If so, raise your hand now or wait till later in the meeting. Okay, seeing none. Moving on to the next agenda item, the approval of the meeting minutes. These were sent out a couple of days ago. If JFAC members wish to approve the meeting minutes as written, we just need a motion to do so and a seconded or a motion to do something else if that's so desired.
So moved. Move to accept the November minutes.
Any
Second.
seconds?
Second.
All right. Meeting minutes are approved. Next on the agenda item is the discussion of historic and cultural resources and relationship to APS facilities, led by Jeff.
Right. Well, I think it was supposed to be a little more robust of a conversation. I guess.
Yeah, we can do that too. Sure.
With regard to what the county has as far as historical designations, et cetera. I'm just going to talk a little bit about the three projects that I've been involved with and how we addressed the historic designations, et cetera. Swanson, they did the window renovations prior to my time, probably 12 years ago. And because that as designated as a historic facade, those windows had to be done in a manner respectful of that design. Since I've been here, we did a security entrance. I don't know how many of you are familiar with it, but we did we reopened the front door. The front door had been closed in a previous renovation because you used to go in the door and up steps and into the building, which was not accessible. So we actually worked with HALRB with regard to the approval of the design that we did. So I'm not sure you're familiar with what we did, but we looked at working with government regulations on historic preservation, on how you address a building where you make it adaptable and reusable or usable, but how do you address that? And the thing that we did with that project was we added to the building, but we did not modify the building for the renovation. So what we did was we actually built an exterior ramp, and then we made a bridge into the old entrance without destroying the columns, without destroying the entrance, to come in on level. And we didn't make it look historic. We made it look like it was an addition. And that was actually passed in our first review with HALRB. So they were happy with what we did and how we did it. But again, any work that we do to that building will have to pass muster with regard to the historic preservation element of that building. The second element that we did was the building was not historic, but the old Wilson building, as part of our use permit, we were required to honor the old Wilson building. And we essentially had to create a plaque that described the old Wilson building at the location where the building was. And we actually built a model that is inside of the new building that shows that building and what it was. And that is how we addressed it with that building. The other thing that we had is the historic element at Dorothy Ham, the fact that it was the first desegregated building, our school building in Arlington. We actually, as part of the addition renovation of that building to turn it into Dorothy Ham Middle School, we actually created, with community input, basically a sculpture element on the outside that honors that designation of being the first school desegregated in Virginia. So that was how we addressed that building. It's not necessarily historic per se, but anyhow, we try to address it. Even if it's not a designated historic building, we try to respect in any of the projects we do the history of the buildings that we are addressing and or renovating. If anybody has any questions, I'll try to answer them. But we were going to have a presentation from the county historic folks, but they're too swamped at this point in time.
I understand. Yeah.
So I've done the presentation.
Thanks, Jeff. I guess my first question is, regarding historical designations of county and APS facilities, does that change how the facility can be used or what we can do with it?
It depends on what it is designated and what designation it gets. If it's a national historic preservation type thing or National Park Service type designation, there are a lot more restrictions that you have put on the building. I know when we were working on the Ed Center, the mid-century modern building, there were people that were trying to designate that at the time to be historic. And
To what end?
Pardon?
Why were they trying to do that?
Because
you don't speculate if you don't know. I just was curious.
No, it's because it was a mid-century modern. It was designed as a gateway to Arlington before they built the parking structure that you couldn't see it from 66 anymore. But the intent is that it became a gateway into Arlington. But it was a mid-century modern example. It was actually, the steel structure of that was revolutionary at the time, being a quarter round, and how they did the structure. I believe it was United States Steel was involved in that, but there was a designation for that historic structural element that the building had. So people were trying to maintain or keep it as a historic building. APS agreed to honor the building as it was and utilize it, but we needed to bring it into the 21st century and make it a usable building. And I think the end result kept the building in the form that it was. We were able to actually improve the sustainability of the building by the shading that we added to the building, because it was very unusable because of the glass facing. It was hundreds of degrees in the building during the summertime. They tried to screen windows by painting them black, which just made it worse. But anyway, the building is very functional at this point in time, and the planetarium and design of the sculptural element of the building is still there.
And have we, I guess sort of related to public-private partnerships, have we done any work with like historical buildings? And that may not be owned by the county?
I have in my history, but I have not done anything in Arlington with historic buildings.
What does that look like in your, I know this is not Arlington County specific, but is that something that a school system can do or a county government can do?
Yeah, I mean, it's no different than Swanson in respecting the windows.
Sure.
It's one of the 5 schools that we're looking at as a feasibility study. Of course, we have to keep that in mind when we did the security entrance. We had to keep that in mind. So yeah, it affects what you do. You hope that it doesn't add cost to the project.
Yeah.
You just hope that you can work with what you've got there and make it work. But again, if it's a facade and you've got to keep the facade, I mean, even at Swanson, one of the things that we did was we found that the flagpole at the front of the building had been relocated 3 times.
Oh.
So as part of this work, we actually put it back where it originally was.
That's cool.
So I
So
mean, there's
definitely,
things that you
yeah.
can fix just by doing the work.
Yeah. And you know, it opens up opportunities to make corrections, like you just pointed out as well.
Correct.
It's pretty cool. Yeah. I encourage all at JFAC to take a look at the slides that Emily shared in the meeting agenda, and then also copied here when she refers to page 75. I've looked at it. It's a wealth of information on how public-private partnerships, how historical designations and how that works, and you know what the county has done in the past. And it's not just things that we own, it's also like just how a private entity can do that as well. It's pretty neat stuff. Does anyone else have any other questions? Please,
Yeah.
Kurt.
Yeah, I think for me the big consideration on this is cost, right? Because there are some, as you discussed, Jeff, there are some changes that can be done fairly inexpensively, and others that are a lot more expensive. It's a balancing test, and depending on the circumstances of individual cases, but in general practice, does there seem to be any kind of threshold above which people think, this is sorry, this is too expensive to do to historic, and like for say if it adds 10% or 20%, or is there some kind of threshold like that seems to be a common level above which you'd have to have something really extraordinary to justify the greater expense?
Well, again, I think the historic designation is generally done before you do a project. Basically, a historic designation is because that building is there. If you try to do a historic designation, as a project like the mansion near where the old McKinley School is, where ATS is now, that building, the house that was at the top of the hill, they tried to make it historic, but it was too little, too late. They couldn't really stop the demolition.
No.
So I think the thing is, it has to be recognized as a historic property in advance. And then it has to be thought out and well documented and provided and approved by the entity that approves it, whether it's county, federal, or state historic designation.
Thanks.
So there's, want to scratch that. There's 3 different ways it can be designated: historical, county, state, or federal.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I would pull up that document to page 75 because it
Yeah.
has all those there, and
Okay.
explains all of them. So it's probably easier to pull up.
Oh, I see it. Yeah. So, okay, cool. That makes sense.
Yeah, there's very few schools that have a historic designation in Arlington at this point in time,
Sure.
but they are listed on the Arlington County site.
Thanks, Jeff. That was actually going to be my question. Are there, as we think about other projects, are there other schools that are listed sites? So
Yeah, I could quickly just kind of go over this. I won't get into detail because, I'm not on the historic preservation team, but they have the local historic districts, easements, the historic resources inventory, the National Park Service's National Register of Historic Places, and historical markers. And then if you keep going through the document here, you can see a list of the local historic district listings. So on this list is Swanson Middle School and Stratford Junior High. So those 2 examples that Jeff talked about are 2 of the local historic districts in the county. I'm not sure about other ones off the top of my head, but
Wait, which ones did you just mention? You mentioned Swanson, and what's the other one?
in Stratford Junior High,
Right, for
Dorothy
Ham.
Han. Yeah.
So those are, I mean, because I was looking at the list, and most of them are not, any of the historic schools are not, they're not schools now. I mean, it
Right.
says, yeah, it says Washington Liberty, or Lee, but obviously that structure's gone.
Which list are you looking at?
I'm not
But
sure.
I just wanted to highlight that, the 2 that Jeff talked about are local historic districts. I can't really speak to, what is and what isn't. But, just to further recommend kind of looking through here.
No, I understand. I'm just like, was looking to see which ones were actually historic buildings. Anyway,
Yeah, so
Yeah,
each
go
one of
down
those
2
categories
pages.
is broken
It's-
down.
Yeah, it's quite a long list.
Um,
Yeah, it was interesting. I was kind of looking through the list and it's extensive, but only 2 categories have a geo, this is where they are in Arlington thing. My first thought was there no history in South Arlington? Because there's a whole lot of historic districts in North Arlington.
Yeah, this one's really long. But yeah, I'm happy to, take down notes to relay to the historic preservation team. If there's anything you guys would like me to ask them.
Do they generally run it by I guess facilities? If they're thinking about trying to designate an Arlington owned building as historical, does that what I mean, I don't know. That's the only thing I can think of that I'm interested in finding out, but
Yeah.
I don't know. Uh, just to get
That's fair.
input on.
It's actually a process that you have to follow. And yes, the owner of the building would be involved with that. And, you know, you basically have to testify, et cetera. So, I mean, yeah, it doesn't just happen. It's not a surprise. Oops, we made your building historical.
Yeah, so you could decide you didn't want to do that. I mean, you know, if, yeah.
I think if you go to the, I bet if you went to there's the both the county board, the county staff side, and then there's also a commission. I bet they have that. I mean, you can sort of also look at the news coverage of the Melwood site. You just sort of can Google that. There's sort of a lot, I think, sort of the discussion around how that fight was happening about making that historic or not. It's sort of fascinating.
Hmm.
I think that's
Cool.
the name of the site. It's
Yeah, I think you're right. Okay. Any other comments, questions? Thanks, Jeff, for leading that presentation. Certainly, we can talk about this again if anyone wants to after reviewing the slides. There's a lot of information in there. It's a pretty cool resource to see all the things that are designated and what you know, not just facilities but spaces, neighborhoods, you know, garden apartments, which is pretty neat. Okay. Moving on to the next agenda item. This is me talking about the school board capital improvement plan direction. The agenda has a link to the CIP direction. What I'd like to do is, you know, go through the slides that was used for the presentation, because I think that contains the changes and the, you know, the gist of the general direction. And then, you know, as we go through, if we have any questions or whatnot, we can certainly make those known at the time. Okay. So from the December 18th meeting, there's a link on the top of the that talks about it. The first change really is just it provides clarity about the CIP process. I won't belabor reading it. And then for the elementary schools, it talks about removing the direction for seat capacity and enrollment trends. Because it was the analysis was for consideration of consolidating schools and identify alternate uses, but it's removing that because they are not considering consolidating or closing schools at this time. So that's interesting. That's good to know, right? Like that's a good thing for our community to not have to go through that upheaval. Next is talking about the middle schools. This is just a, you know, we are going to be renovating TJ and the need to move forward with the project at Swanson, but just need more information. And again, stop me if you have questions or comments you want to throw in there, because I'm reading the slides and can't see your hands. So here's kind of something that relates to us in our public under the heading additional analysis. We'd like to accelerate analysis of different funding models for these projects. I'd like us to look into that PG County one and, you know, have it as an option to talk about at maybe the February or March meeting. And it really would just be identifying any other public-private partnerships that are like this PG County one, and what worked, what didn't. I'd like to find one that's a little bit older if possible, just to see, okay, well, how did this look 5 years from now, 10 years from now? Is there a funding thing that we didn't, that wasn't considered for sustainment? Coming from government procurement, a lot of times it looks good on paper for the initial outlay, but the tail often can wag the whole dog and increase costs, and where you're not really saving any money at all. Not saying that would happen or is happening, but at least in my experience with federal government, a lot of times the tail is not always considered, and the sustainment piece to it. So I will write that down as an agenda item. Okay. Okay, next slide. We're on slide 5 for those keeping track at home. talks about just the planning process, and when it's due by fiscal year of June 30th. And that, that we are attentive to planned projects, major infrastructure, continued assessment of progress on major renovation, and a maximum of 100 million in new bond funding for 27 through 36, according with our debt capacity. And and this is probably a review, but we try and keep it below 10%. And I think this does that. That $100 million figure keeps it below that.
Yeah, it has to. It
For
has
sure.
to stay
Yeah,
below
yeah, yeah.
that.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Thanks, Kathleen. And then, yeah, recognizing the environment that we operate in, that the economy is interesting all the time, especially in the last year, and we are seeing costs increase from coming out of the post-pandemic boom and people wanting to have I don't know, you just think construction costs have gone up significantly, and then yes, we need to prioritize our most urgent infrastructure needs so that we have safe and working and learning environments. Okay. And then, yeah, prevailing wage and climate, of course. That's a good little blurb. That's something that the county uses, or public schools use as guidance to in awarding of contracts, so that prevailing wage and lowest impact of the climate change. Yep. So proposed CIP that includes continuation of the previous ones: the Career Center project, Grace Hopper Center Field, parking garage, the notification of public PA systems, kitchen renovations, and synthetic turf placement projects, and then identifies the major infrastructure projects, colloquially known as the 3 elementary schools and the 2. Oh no, I'm sorry, this is something else. Talks about the what had been done in the past for the roof, for major infrastructure, which is a separate, right, Jeff? The major infrastructure is a separate funding stream than the CIP. Is that right?
That is correct.
what I
We
thought.
basically have a major infrastructure, which is basically upgrading roofs and mechanical systems, etc.
Right.
We may actually add kitchens to this in the future. I don't know. But basically, this is not doing major reconstruction of the building,
Right.
but replacing systems. That's what major infrastructure. So basically modifying the major infrastructure, but not reconfiguring the building. The major renovation projects are the ones where we were looking at modifications for educational environment improvements. The board with the major renovations, however, they want us to look at the major infrastructure, accessibility, and all of those things first. And then the last thing we're looking at is the educational specifications and environment. So we're in the process of looking at all 5 of those buildings in a different way for moving forward with the CIP.
I had a question, just Jeff, I was noticing a lot of the roofs there. I was just wondering, does Arlington County and APS have on staff people like for commercial roofing or for commercial HVAC, or is that all subcontracted out?
We have some folks on staff that are, we have our roofing department, we have our HVAC department. We do some things, but the majority of work, it's so specialty anymore. It ends up being contracted out for the most part. We also have term contracts of experts that we work with, that we work out contracts in advance, and then we can hire them up to a certain amount to do projects for us, whether it's waterproofing, roofing, acoustic projects, architecture, engineering, et cetera, that we bring in people that are experts in what we need at the time. Because if you've got people on staff and they're not doing, say, a certain type of roof for 5 years, the technology passes them by. So you're trying always to make sure that we're as efficient with our resources as we can by bringing the experts in, but knowing enough as APS staff to not be taken advantage of and have somebody come in and try to sell us, you know, sand in the desert or snow on a day like today.
All right. Any other comments? Great. Okay, so moving on to the major innovation section. Yeah, so the 3 elementaries included in the feasible study, plus a proposed renovation of ACC for MPSA. They're based on the same criteria, specifically a requirement to address needs that would qualify as major infrastructure, so different funding pot, I think. Requirement to address safety and accessibility needs. And then options for elementary schools drawn from the 25 feasibility studies and the previous SIP to update ed specs to the extent possible with a budget range of 35 to 50, inclusive of escalated costs since 2024, if applicable. Is that for 3550 per elementary school, or is that 3550 total?
Well, it's as the board clarified to us, that was just a target number. I mean, we're going to be looking at the buildings and, you know, we might have one that comes in at 25 million. We might have one that comes in at, you know, 58 million. We're going to look at the process. We're also going to be providing choices that they can make, that the board can make, or the superintendent in the initial, you know, superintendent's CIP. We're going to take a building to that point or whatever based on the information. You know, we're basically trying to put some more data together that's a little more palatable than, you know, a $200 million project.
Great.
But still solves the issues. And I think the board was wise in what they were talking about, you know, looking at the infrastructure, looking at the safety and accessibility, you know, and then getting in, you know, looking at the feasibility, looking at the capacities of these buildings, you know, and, you know, not expanding capacity, especially in the elementary schools, and looking at that. And then that was for the elementaries, and then the Montessori public school, looking at doing that work. And again, in the same manner of addressing the infrastructure, addressing the safety, security, accessibility, and then, you know, the academic spaces.
Right, within budget constraints. And that, so the option 1 and 2 are the previous SIPs, was the low and medium, I think, from the previous SIP process. So that,
well,
to me, sounds
again,
like
that was looked at in a different way than we're currently looking at these other elementaries, because that was looked at as a budget. We were setting a budget and we're going to work to that budget.
Gotcha.
What we're looking at with the other elementary schools is we're looking at what needs to be done and we're putting an estimate to it. And we're in the process of finalizing that information for the superintendent by sometime in February. So he's able to start utilizing that information to put his CIP together and share with the board the information that we're able to glean for them on that.
Since it's part of the previous SIP, has that started with this new SIP direction? Has anything started with the ACC
No, we
building?
actually, because of the board's conversations, we kind of sat on our hands, and we're directed to not proceed at this time. I think we want to make sure that we're not spending money, even minor design money, until we know that we're proceeding with the project. I mean, design and construction, all of our work is based on a CIP. You know, if we know that there's a change coming in a CIP, we're not rushing down the road to get that other one started, so that, you know, but we heard the caution, we heard the concerns. You know, there's also the county did not sell bonds for 2 cycles. So the county will provide the funding, but we were cautious in what funding we spent. So there's infrastructure projects that we had intended to do that we have not started yet. But we're going to be looking at that and getting those things started as well. Because the funding has been approved, the bonds just haven't been sold.
Sorry, can you explain what you mean by the funding's approved, but the bonds haven't been sold? for as relates to,
The referendum approved the bonds being sold, but they
Yeah.
were not sold because of the economic conditions at the time. The county
Oh.
did not feel it was appropriate to be selling the bonds at that time. So
Okay.
we missed 2 cycles of bond sales. I believe they will be selling bonds this coming spring.
I see. And that bond sales will be used for all the previous CIP approved.
For funding that was already,
Right. Okay.
But in the meantime, the county has said that they have the funds, they will provide the funds for projects that we have in process that the bonds were not sold for, but were approved.
So to your point about not spending money on things that might change CIP direction, does this statement change where MPSA is going, or it sounds like it's not changing at all?
Now, at this point in time, I think the direction, as I understand it, is to proceed with the direction that was there. So we'll
Okay.
see what the superintendent puts in his direction, and we'll see how
Yeah.
the
Fair.
school board modifies it as we move forward.
Yeah. So Andy, it's in there as proposed,
Yeah.
just
Okay.
with that caveat, because we don't know what the world is going to give to us the next couple months. And, it is a very, not selling bonds is a very real thing to signify that there are some underlying economic challenges that we just need to be really careful. And that is very true. And I hope it doesn't come to a point where we have to start thinking about whether we do finish this project, revert course, and, just do middle schools because we need, frankly, those 2 schools need it.
Sure.
But that is why the language is in there as proposed, and that is why we are all very cautious.
Yeah,
Of
and I think the thing to say too is the CIP as a process in itself, and the pre-CIP was giving the direction, or the direction that was being provided is we need to look at these, we need to focus on this. These are things that should be in there. We don't think that this should be in there, or however it was written.
Yeah. Fair.
And the intent is when you start building a CIP, it's a multidimensional puzzle, because you've got to look at time, you've got to look at the dollars that are available, you've got to look at what are the costs, you've got to look at what could the escalation be projected to be,
Right.
so that and you have to look at what is the need. So you're trying to look at what are the most pressing needs, how do the dollars fit together in this puzzle with regard to the timing, et cetera. And I think one of the biggest things with the initial feasibility study was there were a lot of dollars identified that there was no way, based on the way we construct our CIPs, that we would be able to do more than one major project. And the board stepped back and said, hey, we would like to address more than one thing. We've got 40 buildings and we need to make sure that we're addressing the worst of the worst, And I do want to say that I've done facilities in schools for a long time. We do have challenges in our buildings. Every school will have a challenge. Every day that building gets a day older. So, there are things that are always going to be needed maintenance. There are things that are always going to need fixed. When you look at the government reports that say, oh my God, there's $800 billion worth of school needs in the next 12 months. Well, there probably is. It's probably not wrong, but that's over an entire country. And there are things that have to be done, and you have to address them, and you have to look at it in a methodical way and address the things that are the major issues. There are other ways to address it and completely replace something. Sometimes you can patch it, sometimes you can put a temporary fix on it, but you have to know that you did
Of
that,
course.
and you have to extend the time to know that, okay, we added 5 years of life, but in 5 years we have to address this again. So those are all the things that you look at when you put a CIP together, because you have finite amount of dollars, you have finite amount of time, and I think that that's one of the things that we're looking at. And I know you talked a little bit about the additional financial analysis, which is after the middle schools, in the direction. But as part of the CIP, we are looking at the public-private partnerships. energy performance management contracts, mixed-use development, and other innovative financing models that may benefit us. But again, you have to look at all of those things as how does that affect the capital dollars? How does that affect operational dollars? And how does that affect the things that we're doing? Is it more cost effective to actually pay for it ourselves and move forward the way we do? Or is it better to do something like PG County, which basically built 8 schools at one time,
Right.
which they were able to do because they basically have a cookie cutter process that they follow, and they were able to build 8 schools at one time. And the savings there was not necessarily how they did it or what they did it. It was just the fact that they did 8 schools in 2 years or whatever it is, rather than having escalation over 20.
Right.
So there's where the savings was. So you have to do that full evaluation. And, as you said, in the government, it sounds good on paper, but did you really figure everything you needed to figure? So those are the things, and that's part of the CIP direction, was for us to be looking at those things. So it's not like we're not looking at them.
I have a question about, since we're talking about funding, and I know this is going to sound really, really naive. But in looking at the county CIP and the APS CIP, I guess my question is, can you ever just go, look, I would rather give 20 million to schools, and here it is, this park, this, whatever. And all of these things are great in this county CIP, but and I know that's a really naive question, because I know that there's all kinds of stakeholders and different funding streams and whatever, but I don't know, how does that come together? And does it come together at all in our
Yeah, I think
discussion?
the 2 boards actually have communication. They do talk. And when we were building all of these seats, the county actually forewent a lot of projects they were doing and added additional dollars to APS to build those seats, because we had to build the seats as a county. So yes, that does happen. So they can provide additional funding if it's needed for the time. I think even Wakefield, there is additional funding that was provided. But there's there are people in the county that say, hey, it's our turn. We need to get some of these things done. So I understand that. I mean, that's between the 2 boards to wrestle that out and work that out. But in the meantime, we kind of have a process and procedure that we follow that is typical. And I think that's what we're trying to follow in the CIP, where we don't want to, borrow more than that 10% that you see in the bottom of our form that we always show, that we try not to exceed of the funding capabilities. And it's also to keep the A1 rating, because if we don't keep the rating, then we pay more interest, which some of the savings are not there anymore. So that's all part of again, that multi-dimensional puzzle we call the CIP.
Yeah, and I will say, just to give a kudos here to the staff, Jeff, Renee, and Andy within finance, they do an amazing job of coordinating this. Kathy Lynn, who am I missing, Jeff? I mean, they really just do a great job coordinating all of this to make sure that we can to get the projects done that we need to get done, and course correct if we need to. So if a tree falls on a school tomorrow, we will adjust, which I hope not, but we've got all this ice, so who knows? And we have, these guys are really working hard to make sure that we can adjust accordingly. And we use what we need to use. But April, to the point that you were talking about, and going back to the prior conversation earlier about the coordination efforts with schools and the county, and how do we set things up where we can use the facilities? The reality is 80% of Arlington does not have children in the schools. So how are we as school, this is one thing I consider as a board member. I'm one of 5. I want our communities, schools are at the heart of communities. And how do we make that school accessible in a meaningful, safe way to our greater community so that everybody gets value from usage? And maybe that's the park itself, maybe that's, some of the field usage. Sometimes that could be access to the gym. You want to play basketball games in there. Whatever the case may be, we should have a coordinated effort in this piece, which is why I think there's been so much discussion around the school piece, because at the end of the day, we have old schools that need massive renovation. We have the staff has created a very good approach to addressing it, but it will take time to get through everything. And because it takes that much time, then we'll be doing the 20 or 25 year of, the buildings that we just built. So it's going to take us a while to get through everything.
Yeah, you're going to get through everything and then you're going to start over.
Yes, 100%.
So, I mean, and I think it's part of what we're trying to do is to build as durably as we can and use systems and whatnot to get as much life out of them as they can. We're not, I mean, you get a lot of developer grade projects that get built in 5 years. They're replacing the mechanical systems or they're replacing the roofing because they just used stuff to get them through their initial financing and sell the building to somebody else. We own the buildings. We have to make sure they're quality and we have to make sure that they can take the changes and modifications that we do every year in our buildings to accommodate the
Yes.
population and students that we have.
And maintain what we got. Still got to do that.
And I did want to say one other thing is, I mean, you're seeing that we aren't opening school again tomorrow. If anybody knows a custodian, sees a custodian, or any of our maintenance folks, thank them. This
Thank
has
them. They're
probably
working
been
hard.
one of the
Yeah.
worst snow, ice things that I've ever seen. I've removed a lot of ice in my time. This is brutal and has been brutal to them. And they're smiling. They're still getting it done. I mean, you're seeing ice get removed. But thank them,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
if you're involved in a school, make sure the school thanks those folks because they're doing their darndest to get the schools reopened and it's tough. So
No doubt. Yeah.
just wanted to throw that out there. Sorry.
No, that's a good point. But we're not open tomorrow, right? It's closed.
No,
Okay, I was just
no,
making sure. It's like,
you're closed. Yep.
whew. Okay. No, this is great. Not necessarily MPSA specific, but I think this was a great discussion. Thank you, April and Jeff. And then the next part of the slides, we're almost done, gets into the middle schools and same things that were said for the elementary and MPSA, address things that would be major infrastructure, safety and accessibility, and options for updating ed specs. That with those percentages is the only thing different, I think. They use percentages for middle and then an estimated range for elementary. So that's pretty cool. And then finally, public-private partnerships, including analysis of financing strategy for major elementary school renovations. Love to hear more about that when that kind of time comes. Energy performance management contracts, mixed-use development, and other. What is the mixed-use development and other things?
Again, we've actually had some preliminary conversations with some folks, and I'm just going to throw it out. I mean, you have to have an idea, you have to have a plan, you have to have, who wants to finance it, who's going to own it, who's going to. So, I mean, it has to make sense financially. I mean, a lot of everybody, one of the things somebody was talking about was, for federal government, for military bases and having somebody come in and build the housing. They're
Right.
going to get paid to do the maintenance. They're going to get paid to collect the rent. They're going to get paid to, so you're basically hiring somebody to build the housing for you and then you just pay them. And that's a public-private partnership.
Yeah.
So
that's great.
with regard to a school, how does that really work? I don't know. One thing that I know that we have done or we did was AWS or Amazon did the lab at Wakefield. And we also had a private president who funded actually more than Amazon did. I didn't say that out loud, but we actually, that it cost a lot more than people thought it was initially going to cost. But that lab that's in Wakefield, the Amazon lab, that was paid for by others than APS. So that is an example of a public-private partnership. Another public-private partnership that's happening right now is the Arlington Community High School.
Community school. Yep.
Amazon is building that school. They're furnishing that school. We're going to move into that school and have a 30-year lease.
Nice.
Still got to get the lease approved, but that's
Yeah.
coming, this summer, and it's under construction. And we're having meetings on it being furnished and the equipment we have to put in to make it an operational school. So that's pretty amazing.
It is indeed. Kudos to.
But unfortunately, we're going to have to pay to move it. We don't have funding identified for that yet, but we'll figure that out. Again, just like if a tree falls on a building, we'll figure out how to fix it.
Okay. And then the last slide is just the link to the CIP direction. Does any other members have any comments or questions regarding the CIP direction for Jeff and Kathleen? Or Kathleen?
Well, one thing I did want to just say with regard to the middle schools is we've spent a lot of time looking at them and talking about them, and
yeah,
none of our buildings have the same issues and or the same problems. And you have to understand that Swanson is an older building, it's a historic building, it's actually really got a lot of good character to it, it's got a lot of good structure to it. It doesn't have the issues of classroom sizes. It doesn't have the accessibility issues. It doesn't have a lot of the problems that have been identified at Thomas Jefferson. But it does have issues. I mean, you've got safety security issues, with the relocatables and students having to go out to the relocatables. So there is a need for some quote construction. And we're looking at that as part of this next iteration or phase, but it's not going to require the same amount of space that TJ does. You have to understand, if you go back and look at the 1973 drawings of TJ, they basically never built any classrooms. They built some spaces, open spaces that were to be used for classes, but it was also 600 to 700 students. It wasn't 1,200 that are there now. So when you look at what we found during the study, when we did the study, is classroom spaces or educational spaces are about half the size they should be. Well, that's because only half the building is there. So there is going to have to be some construction to make TJ whole, more than likely. But my guess is one of the things the board set up, which I thought was good, was, we're looking at a range of 150 million. And again, that's a plus or minus, just like the 30 to 50 for the elementaries. One may take more dollars and one may take less dollars. But our ultimate goal is to take all 5 of these projects plus the major infrastructure and see how they fit in that 10-year spreadsheet that we do that's called the CIP. And we're hoping and more than hoping, we're trying to figure out a way to make sure that we are addressing more of our buildings than 1 or 2, and trying to address the multiple buildings that we have. It's just like when we tried to create extra seats. It didn't always fit within the 10 years. In fact, one year we actually had a 12-year CIP because we showed a new building was needed 12 years out. But again, we have to work through that and see where the dollars and everything works out. And I think the board gave us excellent direction in looking at it in a different way. And that's when you get into trials and tribulations, you find a different way to look at something, and hopefully we'll meet with success.
Excellent.
And I apologize for my voice. I got something 2 Saturdays ago and I'm still fighting it. So at least it's just down to a voice that's almost not there.
Okay. If there are no other comments or concerns related to the CIP, I think, let me pause. And no hands, no interest. Okay, great. We will move on to the next agenda item, the public comment at the end of meeting. So if there is anyone, okay, Dima? Emily, do you want to run this section? Anyone else? Please raise your hand.
Hi, so, I'm, a parent of two, a high schooler and a middle schooler in Arlington. And, one of the things that struck me is that, a lot of the, TJ students, when they came up before the school boards, one of the big complaints they had about TJ is the lack of sunlight. And it's because was a building that was built in the 1970s, and it was kind of more in those days they didn't want the kids to be distracted by the exterior. But now science has shown us in all these studies that kids do need light, and it really makes a difference to their learning and their attention, and all types of wonderful things. With that premise there, when it comes to the ACC building, originally they were planning on adding a lot of windows, but then they decided, because of costs, that a lot of the windows kind of disappeared. And my concern is putting an elementary school and a preschool in that building without windows, and that once the MPSA is in that building without windows, which was built, by the way, at the same time as TJ, around the same time, in the same decade at least. That would be the big complaint. And then what do we do? Because that's going to be really costly, especially because that building is also very much a concrete building. And I understand it's built to certain types of specifications that we don't do now. And it's really hard to retrofit with windows. But maybe Mr. Chambers can address that. But that's kind of like my one of my big concerns there. I personally would not want to send my preschoolers or elementary school kids to a school with very minimal windows. Thank you.
Great. And you are well into your 3 minutes. Thank you, Dima. Okay, anyone else have any other comments or concerns from the public? Okay. I will be working with staff and our board reps on our next meeting, but and the agenda for February, March, and then going forward for the rest of the year. April, I loved your thoughts and input. I'd like to add an agenda item to rediscuss transportation. We have looked at that in the past, but I think having an opportunity to have another open forum about it is always good. So, and then we'll also do the John will present on the nonprofit utilization of space at our next February meeting, and then March we'll look at public schools for meeting places, and then we'll formulate more for March from there. Anyone have anything else from the board? Any ideas for agenda items? I definitely want this to be a democracy, not a dictatorship. So if people have ideas, yeah, that's great. And sometimes
Andy, I'm not sure if it was, sorry, I'm not sure if it was you cutting out or it's me, but I only got about half of what you just said.
Oh, okay. I was just going over the agenda items for February that we're going to do the nonprofit utilization of space from John, and that we'll we'll talk about what studies have been done about transportation regarding to busing and walk zones, biking, what our statistics are, things like that. That I'll take a round turn with Jeff and Emily on, and then for March we're going to look at the public-private utilization of spaces for schools. And then the funding thing is out there. I don't know when we'll talk about it, but not maybe February, maybe March, probably March. It depends on what goes on. Does that answer your questions, Kathleen?
Yeah, yeah. It may
Okay,
have been
cool.
me.
No worries. Okay. Well, hearing nothing else, is there a motion to adjourn?
So
April?
moved. Okay, then I'll second.
Seconded by John.
And then we
Or
need to
Kurt.
vote on it. When someone seconds, then we need
Oh,
to
yeah.
vote.
Sorry. Let's vote on the meeting minutes being approved. Say all in favor, say aye. Raise your hand.
Aye.
All right. And then, since we didn't do that one, and a motion to adjourn has been nominated to the floor. Any, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Raise your hand. All right. We are thus done with the January meeting of JFAC. Thank you all for coming.
Thanks,
Appreciate
Tom.
your time and attention.
Happy New Year, all.
Thank you. Thank
New Year,
you.
Yeah.